So we are looking at the restrictions imposed by the second law of thermodynamics on the short range memory fluids. So we saw last time that eta tilde is minus del xi tilde rho theta by del theta. And now if you split the stress into an equilibrium stress and extra stress, so basically we saw last time that tau naught is tau tilde of rho theta 0 0, and we saw that tau is equal to tau naught plus sigma, right? So that was the split that we made. So this sigma is the extra stress, right? So sigma is the extra stress or the viscous stress, extra stress or viscous stress. And so we will now substitute this split into the Clausius-Duhem inequality. So what you will get is that del xi tilde by del f of rho theta, this is times f transpose minus, f delta transpose minus 1 by rho times tau naught of rho theta, the whole thing matrix inner product L minus sigma rho theta G L times L divided by rho plus 1 by rho times Q tilde of rho theta G L dot G is less than or equal to 0. So basically all we have done is that we have substituted the split. That means we have split the stress tensor into the equilibrium stress and the viscous stress, and then we have substituted that into the Clausius-Duhem inequality. So if you now choose the G delta to be 0, so choose G diamond is equal to 0, then you will get that del by del f of xi tilde of rho theta, this is times f transpose minus 1 by rho times tau tilde of rho theta times L minus 1 by rho times sigma tilde of rho theta 0 L matrix inner product L is less than or equal to 0. So we have simply set the temperature gradient to 0 here in this particular case. So now the argument is a little bit delicate here, and so we have to take care in following this particular argument here. So we have seen that tau tilde is continuous with respect to L, is continuous with respect to L. Okay. And so tau tilde of rho theta 0 L will tend to tau naught for rho theta, as L tends to 0. So this is just a consequence of the conductivity, or so because the stress tends to the equilibrium stress as L tends to 0, so the viscous stress will tend to 0. So this is rho theta 0 L tends to 0 as L tends to 0. So we will use this continuity requirement now. So if you now replace L by beta L, so replace, just right here. So if you replace L by beta L, let us say, and choose beta to be sufficiently small, choose beta to be sufficiently small, the first term will dominate the second term. The first term dominates the second term. Dominates the second term. See, that is because, so you can think of it that, see, this part is tending to 0 as n tends to 0. So in some sense, this is proportional to L. So basically you will get something like L square or something like that. So I mean not exactly L square, but basically L matrix inner product L, and so that will lead to beta square in this particular term. Whereas in this particular term, L is occurring only once, so this will be beta. So if you choose beta to be sufficiently small, beta square will be much less compared to beta, and so then this term will dominate this other term here. And then if you now switch the sign on beta, right, then we'll see that whatever is the bracketed term, that has to go to 0. Right? So that's so this will imply so switching the sign on beta. So after switching the sign on beta, what you will get is that tau naught of rho theta is equal to rho times del xi by del f of rho theta times f transpose. So this is the result that now you will get. So this is the expression for the equilibrium stress now. And then now if you substitute this into the other expression here, so now this term will go to 0 here, and so you will get the general dissipation inequality. So you will get, so substituting this now, so substituting this into the Clausius inequality, into the Clausius inequality, you will get that minus of sigma tilde matrix inner product T plus 1 by theta u tilde dot G is less than or equal to 0. So this is the generalized dissipation inequality. So we cannot separate it because we cannot write that individually. We cannot write Q dot G is less than 0 and sigma tilde T greater than 0. So that split we cannot make in this particular case. So let us now summarize all the results from this particular theorem. So as a consequence of the second law of thermodynamics, so we have now summary. So what you have now is that xi is xi tilde of rho theta, eta tilde is equal to minus del xi by del theta. Then tau naught is equal to rho times del xi tilde by del f times f transpose, and minus sigma tilde times T plus 1 by theta u tilde dot G is less than or equal to 0. So this is the summary of all the results. Of course, we can simplify this further because we have seen that the dependence on f reduces to a dependence on rho. So I have still not used that, as I said at the beginning, that actually these results will be valid even for a viscoelastic solid. So that is the reason I did not reduce it at this stage. But now for a fluid, we can say that the dependence on f reduces to a dependence on rho, and hence we can simplify this further. So I can write now, so let me carry out that simplification. So basically you will get a hydrostatic state of stress here for this equilibrium stress. So you will get tau naught of rho theta is equal to rho times del xi tilde by del f times f transpose. So this is equal to rho times del xi tilde by del rho times del rho by del f times f transpose, and we use the fact that rho naught is equal to rho times g, and so basically this would be the derivative, this del rho by del f would be the derivative of 1 by j with respect to f. And so what you will get there is you will get minus of rho square times del xi tilde by del rho times the identity tensor. That's because you will get the cofactor of f and so on and so forth. So cofactor f times f transpose is determinant f times identity. So you use all the relations that we have derived earlier in order to get this particular relation. So now you can see that the equilibrium stress is just a hydrostatic state of stress. So this part here we will call as the thermodynamic pressure now. Okay, so this basically we will now have that tau naught of rho theta is equal to minus p of rho theta times identity tensor, where this p of rho theta is equal to rho square times del xi tilde by del rho. So this is a rigorous definition of the thermodynamic pressure, and we also have a relation for the thermodynamic pressure in terms of the free energy function. So this is so these are the results that come out of this whole thing. Fine. So now again let us substitute this split of this stress tensor into the balance of linear momentum and see what we get from there. So if we so now we have tau is minus p of rho theta times identity plus sigma, and if we substitute that, then we get a rho times del v by del t plus del v times v is equal to minus del p plus del dot sigma plus rho times v. Okay, so the balance of linear momentum now can be written in this particular manner, and the energy equation can be written as rho dE by dt is equal to minus p del dot v plus sigma matrix inner product d minus del dot q plus rho times qh. Okay, so this is now the energy equation, so we can write it in this particular way here. Right. So, okay, so now let us see the consequences of material framing difference. So as I said that even in the thermoelasticity part, if you recall, first we found the restrictions imposed by the second law of thermodynamics, and then after that we applied material framing difference. So we are going to carry out the same thing here also. So we will now look at what are the restrictions imposed on the constant relation by the principle of material framing difference here. So MFI now, the restrictions imposed by MFI. So you will get that sigma tilde of rho theta qg, this is ql q transpose plus q dot q transpose is equal to q times sigma tilde of rho theta gl times q transpose. So this part here is nothing but L star. Right? So we are basically writing it as the sigma tilde of QF, right, is equal to Q times sigma tilde of F times Q transpose. Right? And so I mean, so this was for the deformation gradient, but this is the analogous thing for that. So this, if you recall, is F star. So in the same way. Now this is L star, and then that is linked to L, to sigma tilde at L through this particular relation here. Okay, so similarly for the Q tilde, you will have rho theta qg times QL Q transpose plus Q dot Q transpose is equal to Q times Q tilde of rho theta g l. And so now we will try to see what are the restrictions imposed by that. So what we will see is that the dependence on L will reduce to a dependence on D, the rate of deformation tensor. So that is what we will see. So in order to show that, so fix now t, that is let the time be fixed, and let q of tau be equal to e to the t minus tau times w tilde. So this w tilde is of course a skew symmetric tensor here, and that is actually equal to the vorticity tensor. So this w tilde is the vorticity tensor. Okay, so then now you will get that q evaluated at t will be equal to identity, and q dot is equal to minus w tilde e raised to t minus tau times w tilde. So here this dot is the derivative with respect to tau, not with respect to t, because t is fixed actually, and so now q is actually a function of tau now. So this derivative is with respect to tau, not with respect to t. And so you will get that q dot of t now. So q dot of t will be equal to minus w tilde. So if we now substitute these things into this, then what you will see is that you will get L minus w tilde. And L minus w tilde is nothing but d itself, right? So that is the symmetric part of the velocity gradient. And so what you will get now that so with this choice of q, you will get that L star is equal to d. So that is and hence the dependence on L, dependence on L reduces to a dependence on D. Dependence on L reduces to a dependence on D. To a dependence on D. So that is the conclusion that we get. And basically, the constant relation should depend on the rate of deformation tensor. So let us now write it in the reduced form now. So we will get now that sigma tilde now rho theta q d q transpose is equal to q times sigma tilde of rho theta g d times q transpose. So again, I am writing now the material framing difference condition by replacing L by D. So this is nothing but D star. This is nothing but D star. And so sigma tilde of D star is Q times sigma tilde of D times Q transpose. And so this is similarly you will get Q tilde of rho theta QG times Q D Q transpose is equal to Q times Q tilde of rho theta g d. And so now we need to find the characterizations for such functions here. And so you can see here that this is nothing but a generalization of so I think I missed out QG here. So this is nothing but a generalization of the Rivlin-Eriksson theorem, right? So here you have QG also in addition to this. So suppose if this QG had not been present, we could have directly used the Rivlin-Eriksson theorem. But because this QG is present in this case, we need to generalize that Rivlin-Eriksson theorem. So that is discussed in many papers, so we are not going to go into that. But basically you can replace, G by G direct G, okay, and this we will call as G, and so you can now write this sigma tilde of rho theta G now D is equal to gamma naught of I plus gamma 1 of D plus gamma 2 of D square plus gamma 3 of G plus gamma 4 of G square plus gamma 5 of dg plus gd plus gamma 6 of d square g plus gd square plus gamma 7 of dg square plus g square d plus gamma 8 of d square g square plus g square d square, where these gammas are functions of the principal invariants of d square d cube and so on. So let me just write that down. So rho theta g d is equal to gamma I tilde of rho theta trace of d square trace of d cube comma trace of g square trace of g cube comma trace of dg, then trace of dg square and trace of d square g square. Okay, so this is so you can see that it's a very complicated function that you get. So these gammas are now functions of all of these variables, and your most general form of this sigma tilde is given by this particular thing. So you can easily see that if g is equal to 0 now, this capital G, if that is equal to 0, then you can see that only these first three terms will survive, right? And that is exactly the Rivlin-Eriksson theorem there in that particular case. So you can see that this whole result is a generalization of the Rivlin-Eriksson theorem to the case of an isotropic tensor valued function of two tensor variables. So here you can see that now this g is one tensor variable and then the d is another tensor variable, and so this is the result for an isotropic tensor valued function of two tensor variables. Okay, so as I said that you can look at the papers in the literature to find a proof of this particular thing here. Okay, then let us continue on this. So if you have now g is equal to 0, so let us write that now. So if you now write that if the g is equal to 0, then we have the mechanical dissipation inequality. Mechanical dissipation inequality. So that is that sigma of rho theta 0 d matrix inner product d is greater than or equal to 0 for all d belonging to sim. So that is the result that we get. And when d is equal to 0, when d is equal to 0, then we get the heat conduction inequality. So heat conduction inequality. So that is q tilde of rho theta g0 dot g is less than or equal to 0 for all g belonging to R3. That's the space of all vectors here. Yeah. So, but as I already said, that you cannot separate it out into these two inequalities in general. So, suppose if d and g are both non-zero, right, then you will get just minus sigma tilde matrix inner product d plus q tilde dot g is less than or equal to 0. Okay, so you cannot separate it out. So here, if g is 0, then this holds, or if d is 0, then this holds. But in general, suppose if d and g are both non-zero, then you cannot separate it out into two separate inequalities. Then you have to consider it as a joint inequality with whatever is written here. Okay, now let us take the special case g equal to 0 and see what the constitutive relation for the fluid is going to be. So for g is equal to 0, for g equal to 0, you will get that sigma tilde of rho theta 0 d now is equal to gamma 0 of rho theta 0 invariance of d times identity plus gamma 1 of rho theta 0 invariance of d times d plus gamma 2 of rho theta 0 invariance of d times d squared. So actually this result can also directly follow from the Rivlin-Eriksson theorem or by setting g equal to 0 in that general result that I had written on in the previous video. So now these coefficients have to obey this particular restriction, right? So these coefficients cannot be arbitrary. So as we said that in the case of thermoelasticity, we saw that thermodynamics did not impose any restriction on the constitutive relation. But in the case of fluid mechanics, we see now that there is this restriction, and now these gamma 0, gamma 1 and gamma 2 are subject to the restriction imposed by this particular relation. So let us just write this as star. So gamma 0, gamma 0, gamma 1, gamma 2 are subject to the restriction, subject to the restriction imposed by star. Imposed by star. Okay. Fine. Alright, so now if we restrict the constitutive relation to be a linear relation, then we can use the characterization for a linear isotropic tensor value function, right? And so you will get in that particular case, so for a if one restricts the constitutive relation to be the constitutive relation to be linear, then you will get that sigma tilde of rho theta b is equal to lambda of rho theta times trace of b times identity plus 2 mu times rho theta times d. So these lambda and mu are now viscosity coefficients, right? So this lambda is the dilatational viscosity. Viscosity, and mu is the shear viscosity, viscosity, and you can see that both these viscosity coefficients can depend on rho and theta. So this is something that is very well known, that the viscosity coefficients will change with temperature, right? and also with the density. So these are functions of this one there. So this is also known as dynamic viscosity, also known as dynamic viscosity. Okay, so and then sometimes we also define the kinematic viscosity. So this is mu divided by rho. So this is known as the kinematic viscosity. Viscosity. Okay, so that is the and so this any fluid that obeys this kind of a constitutive relation is said to be a Newtonian fluid. Okay, so this is a Newtonian fluid. Okay. So as I already mentioned, that examples of Newtonian fluids are air and water. So 99% of the fluids on Earth are air and water, and so very fortunately this constitutive relation holds for air and water, and so that is why we don't need to worry about the constitutive relation. So this constitutive relation is valid for any value of d. So this is something that is very important. So I will just repeat that. So basically we are saying that there is no restriction on d. So it may appear that actually this has been derived by assuming d to be small, but that is not the case. Okay, so remember, d is not a dimensionless variable. D has units of per unit time, right? So we cannot even talk about d being small. I mean, small with respect to what, correct? So for the strain, we can say that the strain components are small with respect to 1 because that's a non-dimensional quantity. But in this case, we cannot even talk about d being small because the dimensions are per unit time. And so it is not that this relation is valid only when d is small. That is not the case. So basically, it is just that the constitutive relation for air and water just turns out to be linear. So that is just how nature has made it. And so it should not be considered that this relation is valid only when d is small. So to summarize, this relation is valid no matter what the d is. And so actually, so that has very important implications in the sense that if you are considering turbulent flow, for example, right, and then you have very large gradients of velocity, and so even for a turbulent fluid, this constitutive relation will be valid. Okay, so that is why DNS, direct numerical simulation, is successful because you don't have to change the constitutive relation. So basically, you just keep on refining the grid. And then your same code will work in that case also, because as I said, the same equation. So even if the flow becomes turbulent, the equations still remain the same. Okay, so whatever are the Navier-Stokes equations that we are going to derive based on this constitutive relation, those relations still remain valid. Okay, so that is the idea there. Fine. So this the constitutive relation which we derived for this one here. So this one here is known as a Reiner-Rivlin fluid. Reiner-Rivlin fluid. So you can see that the Newtonian fluids is a special case of Reiner-Rivlin fluids. Okay, so let us just draw a figure here to illustrate this particular thing here. Okay. So we have now, let us draw this. So we have this set of Reiner-Rivlin fluids, and this is the Newtonian fluid. Right? So this is Newtonian, and this bigger set is Reiner-Rivlin, right? Reiner-Rivlin. So there is one very, very interesting fact that I am now going to mention, that there is no fluid on Earth which falls in this particular part here. So that means it is Reiner-Rivlin but not Newtonian. There is not even a single fluid that exists here. So then you may ask, then what about the non-Newtonian fluids, right? Like we discussed polymer solutions, blood, all these are non-Newtonian fluids. So where if there is no fluid here, then where do they fall? So basically they fall outside of this circle here. So that means if you recall, that's what I said, that the list of kinematical assumptions that you make in the beginning is very, very important for determining what the constitutive relation is. So if you recall, we had that tau is tau tilde of f dot, if you recall, right? Now this f dot will capture only a very short term memory, and so that short term memory works for fluids like air and water, but it doesn't work for polymers and blood and things like that, which are non-Newtonian fluids. So what that means is that a larger amount of memory needs to be incorporated into this constitutive relation in order to capture the behavior of non-Newtonian fluids. Okay, so that is a very, very complicated game. So we will not go into that, because as I said, that people are still struggling to find the constitutive relations for non-Newtonian fluids, and so there are all kinds of very crude models based on springs, dashboards, things like that. So it's a very big struggle to find constitutive relations for non-Newtonian fluid. But very luckily, the short-term memory effects are able to capture the behavior of air and water, which are Newtonian fluids. And so, as I said, that is just a matter of luck. I mean, nature has just designed in that particular way here. Okay, so now let us look at the restrictions imposed on these viscosity coefficients by the mechanical dissipation inequality. So we have seen now that sigma is equal to lambda trace of d times identity plus 2 mu times d, and sigma matrix inner product d is greater than or equal to 0. So, so we have shown this in the context of an earlier result here, that this is if and only if mu greater than or equal to 0 and lambda plus 2/3 mu is greater than. By discussing the Lame coefficients for a solid, elastic solid, we had shown these particular inequalities, and so the same proof will hold even in this particular case here. So the dynamic viscosity coefficient should be greater than or equal to 0, and then this combination of the dilatational viscosity and the dynamic viscosity should have this greater than 0. So basically your lambda can be negative, but this combination should be greater than or equal to 0. So, so this part here is known as the bulk viscosity. So this bulk viscosity should be greater than or equal to 0. So, as I said, that basically, so the second law imposes restrictions on the constant relation for a fluid. So, that is in contrast to the case of thermoelasticity, where it did not impose any restrictions, if you recall. So, okay, then similarly, we'll have now for d equal to 0 now. So, let's take the heat conduction inequality. So, for d equal to 0, now you will get that. Okay, so let me just write the constitutive relation first before reducing that. Let me just write out the constitutive relation for the fluid now. So before doing this, we'll have that Q tilde will be equal to, so Q tilde we saw of rho theta Qg times Qd Q transpose is equal to Q times Q tilde of rho theta G. So now we are finding the restrictions imposed by material frame indifference on the flux, heat flux. So from this we will get that Q tilde is equal to beta 0 identity plus beta 1d plus beta 2d square times G, okay, where G is the temperature gradient, and these beta alphas are beta alpha tilde of rho theta trace of d square trace of d cube, then g dot g, then g dot dg and g dot d square. So these are the coefficients beta are functions of this one. So again you can see that it's a very complicated relation, but typically if we just take d to be 0, so that means the fluid is stationary, then in that particular case you will get that, so when d is equal to 0, so when d is equal to 0, you will get that Q tilde of rho theta g 0 is equal to minus k times rho theta g mod of g times g, and this is known as the Fourier law of heat conduction. Right? So this is known as the Fourier law of heat conduction. So if you notice, all the classical results, that the constitutive relation for the Newtonian fluid, the restrictions imposed by the second law on the viscosity coefficients, the Fourier law of heat conduction, the restrictions imposed on this K. So all these things, right, these are known results, but now using this framework we have been able to give very systematic derivations of all of these relations. So that is the importance of this whole framework. So it's a very rigorous and systematic derivation of all the equations here. So if you now substitute this constant relation into the relation that Q dot G is less than or equal to 0, so that will give you that K of rho theta G is greater than or equal to 0. Right? So that is the result that you will get from this one. And the other result is that if your G is equal to 0, then you will see that this Q tilde is also equal to 0 here. So let us state that particular result also here. So if I call this relation as double star, then from double star we will get, so from double star we will get that the heat flux vanishes. Heat flux vanishes if the temperature gradient vanishes. If the temperature gradient is 0. And is 0. So that is one. So this looks like an intuitive result, but still, as I said, that the importance of this framework is that we are able to derive these results very rigorously instead of relying on intuition and so on and so forth. So this is rho theta 0 d is equal to 0, and we also saw that this K has to be greater than or equal to 0. So that is another result, that this K of rho theta G, so this is the conductivity, so that is greater than or equal to 0. So that also has to be non-negative. Okay, so whatever results we have derived, as I said, that if you don't replace the F by rho, then all these results are also valid for a viscoelastic material with short-term memory. Okay, so that short-term memory will stay because our constitutive relation was dependent on F dot, right? And so that is a consequence of the diagram of the thing here. Okay, so actually now if you continue with this framework here, then you will get the various kinds of results. So let me just mention some of the few results that you get. So let me just write it here. So you will get, for example, that so I'm not going to go into the derivation of these relations, so that is given in the book, but you can take a look at the book here. So that is dE by dt plus P times dV by dt. So this is what is known as Gibbs relation. So Gibbs relation. So actually, as I said, that there is no new result that we have derived. Almost all these results are known results. So if you look at the thermodynamics books, they will mention this result, but they will write it as theta d eta is equal to dE plus PD. Okay, so they will write it in this particular way, and so this relation is, as I said, already known as the Gibbs relation, and it is you can see this in books on thermodynamics. But you will see that it is very vague. I mean, in the thermodynamics textbooks, what does the meaning of this d eta? It is not very clear. Is it an increment? Is it an infinitesimal quantity? Whereas now, as I said, that once we have derived this rigorously, we now see that these are material derivatives, and so the material derivatives are of course well-defined objects. So this ambiguity about what this d eta and d and pdv means is no longer present. So these are basically, this is to be interpreted as material derivatives, and so as I said that by using this very systematic framework, we are able to derive all these conventional relations which are already known, but we are putting them in a more rigorous framework here. Then similarly, you will get an equation for the entropy. So let me write that. So rho theta d eta by dt is equal to sigma matrix inner product D plus rho QH minus del dot Q. So this is a relation that you can derive. Now again, this relation is also very, very important. Okay, so in the case of thermoelasticity, we saw that there the equation for the entropy change involved only this part. There was no sigma matrix inner product D in that particular case. So there we concluded that a process is isentropic if and only if it is adiabatic. So that means if rho QH minus del dot Q is equal to 0, then the entropy does not change. And if the entropy does not change, then rho QH minus del dot Q is equal to 0. So basically in thermoelasticity there is no dissipation. But in the case of fluids, you will see that this additional term is what is known as the viscous dissipation term. Okay, so even if there is no heat input, it will still cause an increase in the entropy because sigma matrix inner product D is greater than or equal to 0. So the entropy will keep on increasing, right, because of this viscous dissipation. So that is why it is often said that viscosity is like a friction. So just like in a solid, the friction will generate heat and entropy, right? So in the same way, this is internal to the fluid. I mean, this is in the case of friction, it is at the contact surface, but here this is within the fluid. There is viscous dissipation. So this sigma D is the viscous dissipation that causes a change in the entropy here. And so, as I said, that this result is fundamentally very different from thermoelasticity, where there is no dissipation happening there. Fine. As I said, that one can continue deriving various kinds of relations, but in the case of fluids, let me just mention that they also define these specific heats at constant volume and at constant pressure. So let me just mention those things also here. So specific heat at constant volume, specific heat at constant volume, and also at constant pressure. So this is CV. So that is defined as del E tilde by del theta at V. This V is the specific, so V is the specific volume, that is 1 by rho, and then similarly at constant pressure also they will define. So that is at constant pressure Cp, so that is equal to del H tilde by del theta. So the this is at constant pressure. So the motivation behind defining these specific heats at constant volume and pressure is that these things can be determined experimentally. Okay, and so we can write the energy equation in terms of these coefficients. So something that can be measured experimentally, they become like material constants basically, and then these properties will be tabulated for various fluids, and then you can use these properties in the energy equation. Okay, so just to give an illustration of that, what you will get is you will get the energy equation as follows. So as I said, I am not going to go into the derivation because they are very detailed derivation. You can take a look at the book if you are interested in the derivations, but let me just mention the final result here. So this is rho CV d theta by dt is equal to minus theta del p by del theta evaluated at rho and del dot v plus sigma matrix inner product D minus del dot Q plus rho QH. So as I said that now this CV will be known for a given gas or liquid or whatever it is, and then now you can substitute that into this and then find out what the response is, because the other variables are something that you are trying to determine from your set of equations here. So in that sense, now the set of equations get simplified to something in terms of known material properties, and so that is the idea here. And then similarly, an equation can also be written in terms of Cp also. So I will mention that equation also. So rho Cp change d theta by dt is equal to minus theta by rho times del rho by del theta evaluated at p times dp by dt plus sigma d minus del dot Q plus rho times Q. So you can see that this viscous dissipation term is now entering into all these equations. See, because basically the viscous dissipation term increases the entropy, the internal energy. So see here in this case it is increasing the internal energy also, right? So this viscous dissipation term plays a very important role in all of these relations here. Okay, so then after that one can make some further simplifications, like we can assume the gas to be an ideal gas, and then we can have a state relation of the type P is equal to rho r theta, where this r is Cp minus Cv and so on. So again, we will not go into all these special cases where you know you can basically make a lot of approximations or assumptions and derive special forms of these energy equations for an ideal gas. So some of that stuff you may have seen in your fluid mechanics classes here. So I will just give a summary now of the final set of equations that we get now. So by substituting the constitutive relation, so the constitutive relation we have seen is tau is equal to minus P of rho theta times identity plus sigma, where this sigma is lambda trace of d times identity plus 2 mu d. So this is in the case of a Newtonian fluid, this is the constitutive relation. So if you substitute the constitutive relation into the balance of linear momentum, then we get what are known as the Navier-Stokes equations, basically. So let us write these equations. Navier-Stokes. So this is just a summary of the final equations that we get. Navier-Stokes equations. So and energy equation and energy equation. So as I said, by substituting the constitutive relation, the constitutive relation into the balance of linear momentum, the balance of linear momentum, we will get that rho times del V by del T plus del V times V is equal to minus del P plus lambda plus mu times del of del dot V plus mu times del square of V plus rho times V. Okay, so these are what are known as the Navier-Stokes equations. So Navier-Stokes equations. Okay. So as I said, that these are valid for all Newtonian fluids, like air and water. I already mentioned are the primary examples of this one here. And similarly, for the energy equation, you will get rho times Cv times d theta by dt is equal to minus theta del P by del theta rho times del dot V plus lambda del dot V square plus 2 mu times d matrix inner product d plus k del square theta plus rho times QH. So that is in terms of the specific heat at constant volume. Similarly, you can also derive something in terms of the specific heat at constant pressure, and that is equal to minus rho by theta del rho by del theta times dP by dt plus lambda del dot V square plus 2 mu times d matrix inner product d plus k times del square theta plus rho times QH. Now if you further make the if you further substitute it into the entropy equation, then you will also get rho theta d eta by dt is equal to lambda del dot V square plus 2 mu times d matrix inner product d plus rho QH minus del dot Q. So that is now the equation for the entropy here. So basically, this is the summary of the various types of equations that you will have to solve here. So one important thing that I will note at this stage is that I have not made any assumption about incompressibility. Okay, so here you can see there are terms like this del dot B and so on in these equations. So those terms can be set to 0, right? If you are assuming that the fluid is incompressible. So you can make further simplification. So if you are dealing typically with liquids or even with gases at low Mach numbers, typically let's say less than 0.2, you can assume the fluid to be incompressible, and in that particular case, this del dot V and all these things can be said to be 0. In the case of a compressible fluid, you will see that these equations are coupled in the sense that you cannot solve for these variables independently. Like in the momentum equation, you will see that the viscosity coefficients depends on the temperature, and then similarly in the temperature equation, so that is this these two, either of these equations. So actually we don't need to solve both of them. Either of these two equations, you will see that it depends on the velocity through the rate of deformation tensor. So you can see that at least when you are dealing with a compressible fluid, these equations are coupled, and so you have to solve them also in a coupled way. Okay, you cannot uncouple them. If it is an incompressible fluid, then actually you can uncouple them, in the sense that suppose if you assume that the viscosity coefficients do not depend on the temperature, suppose if the conditions are almost isothermal, then you can solve for the velocity field using the Navier-Stokes equations, and then you can substitute it into the energy equation to find the temperature. So it's a one-way coupling. I mean, you can approximate it as a one-way coupling in case the fluid is incompressible. But in general, so if you have taken courses in gas dynamics or compressible fluid where you have shock waves and things like that, you will see that actually all these equations have to be solved in a coupled manner. You cannot uncouple them. So basically you have to solve for the density, the density, pressure, temperature and velocity. All of these variables you have to solve for. And your constitutive relations should be consistent with the second law of thermodynamics. So whatever restrictions that we have imposed through the second law of thermodynamics, you have to take your constitutive relations to satisfy that. So, but once you ensure that your constitutive relation satisfies the restrictions imposed by the second law of thermodynamics, then after that you don't need to worry, in the sense that you don't need to worry about the second law explicitly, because your constitutive relations are necessary and sufficient conditions for the second law to be satisfied. So in that sense, once we ensure that the coefficients, the material constants like the viscosity coefficients and things like that, once they obey the restrictions that we derive, then we no longer have to worry about the second law of thermodynamics, and then we can just solve these particular equations. Automatically the second law will be satisfied here. So, so that is the summary of all the equations. Just one last thing for today is this. Okay, this of course. Okay, so in addition to this, we also need an equation of state. So let me just state that. So that is P is equal to P tilde of rho comma. So that also you need to supplement. Again, if it is incompressible, then constitutively the pressure will be indeterminate, and then it has to be found. So this del P in the case of an incompressible fluid would have to be found by solving this particular equation. Constitutively it will not be determinate, but this is the case for a compressible fluid. So yes, as I said, that you will need to solve all these equations. Now of course, so that is where your fluid mechanics courses, you must have already seen how to solve special cases of this, and you can see that it's a horrendous set of coupled partial differential equations, and finding very general solutions is not at all possible. So we make certain types of assumptions in trying to solve these equations. So many times we will assume that a fluid is inviscid and irrotational, so that will be called as potential flow, or we will assume that the del V times V term is negligible, and also this del V by del T, so that this whole inertia term is negligible. So that we call as low Reynolds number hydrodynamics, or sometimes we'll assume only unidirectional flow, and then that gives us some simplification. So basically, under some special cases, we are able to find solutions to these particular set of equations. Otherwise, of course, I mean, you can always do these things numerically, but even numerically, it is a very big challenge to try and solve all these sets of equations here. Let me just, since many of you may not have covered fluid mechanics courses, so I will just give one example of how to solve the Navier-Stokes equations. So without the thermal effects, of course, just we will assume the fluid to be incompressible and fully developed. So this is a standard example in many of the fluid dynamics texts. So this is like a two-dimensional flow. There is a plate here, and we want to find out what is the velocity field that is set up. So basically, there is a this is D is a layer of fluid, and then now you are having a plate on top of this layer, and then you are moving this plate with some velocity u, and this bottom plate is fixed. Okay, and we want to find out what is the velocity field here. So this is a very standard example. This is known as Couette flow. Flow, and so here the flow is generated totally by the plate itself. So there is no imposed pressure gradient. So otherwise, another way of generating the flow would be to keep this plate stationary and impose a pressure gradient here, and then that can drive the flow. But in this case, we are assuming that the pressure gradient is zero, and only the velocity of the plate is driving the flow here. So we will assume that it is fully developed. So fully developed means that basically, see, if it in the beginning there will be all kinds of gradients in this, but after a certain amount of time has elapsed, then the del u by del x will be 0. Del u by del x equal to del v by del x equal to 0. So there is no change in the velocity in this particular direction. So this is known as fully developed. And if we now use and also steady, so there is another assumption that we are making is that the flow is steady. So that means del u by del t is also equal to 0. So under these assumptions, we will try to find the steady state solution here. So if you look at the continuity equation, so del u by del x plus del v by del y is equal to 0. So this is the incompressibility condition, and you will see here that because it is fully developed, so fully developed means that your del u by del x is 0, del u by del x is equal to 0. So that will imply that del v by del y is equal to 0, and so that will imply that v is some function of x. But on the bottom surface, you will see that v is equal to 0. So there is a no slip boundary condition on the bottom surface and also on the top surface. So that means the fluid will move with the same velocity as the surface that it is in contact with. Right? And so here this velocity is 0. So that will give that since v and y equal to 0, so that will give you that f of x equal to 0. So what that implies is that the velocity in this particular direction, so this is your x direction and this is your y, so there is no velocity in the vertical direction here. So that's so that gives here that v is equal to 0 everywhere. So that is the conclusion that we get from because of the boundary condition and the fully developed condition here. Then if you now look at the Navier-Stokes equations, then you will get that 0 is minus del p by del x plus mu times del square ux by del x square plus del square ux by del y square. And again, we have seen that del u by del x is 0, so at all x, and so this term also goes to 0. And then we are saying that there is no pressure gradient that is imposed in this flow. The flow is being driven by the plate that is moving, and so no pressure, no imposed pressure gradient. And so this is the equation that we get. The second Navier-Stokes, the second equation, that is just that will just give you minus del P by del Y, and so that will just give you that the hydrostatic variation of the pressure in the Y direction. This is the second Navier-Stokes equation. So they are assuming that everything is planar, that there is nothing happening in the Z direction here. So now U is a function of X alone, right? Because Ux is a function of Y alone. Because of this fully developed condition here, and so this will give you that v square ux by dy square is equal to 0, and so that will give you ux is equal to c1y plus c2. Okay, one important thing I think I forgot to mention is that we did not justify that del V times V is equal to 0. So when the flow is unidirectional, then actually and fully developed, then del V times V is del U by del X, del U by del Y. This is del UX, or okay, I'm actually confusing between U and V here. Let me not write the X here. Right? This is not needed because I've already indicated it as U and V. So here also I will just use U. So this is del U by del Y, del V by del X, del V by del Y times U times V. And this we have seen V is just 0. Right? So this is 0. And now because it is fully developed, we have that del U by del X is 0, del V by del X is 0, del V by del Y is also 0 because V itself is 0 throughout the flow. So you will see that del V times V is equal to 0. So this is the only non-zero component actually, but that is multiplying this 0 component. So this is equal to 0, 0. So the nonlinear term, see the main difficulty in finding analytical solutions is this nonlinear term. And so basically most of the analytical solutions are for the case where somehow this nonlinear term vanishes, because then once you have linearity, then you can use the usual special functions like Bessel functions and Legendre polynomials and this and that too, and you can superpose solutions, all that kind of machinery you can use once the nonlinearity goes away. And so, so that was the justification for del V times V equal to 0. And so as I said, that your basically the inertia term just goes to 0, and then you get this. And then after this, it is just a matter of writing the boundary condition. So U is 0 and Y equal to 0 because of the no slip condition, and at the top surface you have that it is the velocity is U. So this will lead to U is equal to U times Y divided by U. So this is a classical result that the velocity of this fluid is linear, has a linear variation. This is of course the steady state velocity, as I said, that first initially there will be some transient, but after some time because of the viscosity effects, the transients will die out and then you will reach to this particular steady state solution here. Okay, with that we will conclude this course.